Hello and welcome back to Hooked by Heather. Today we're going to make an ornament. It's like a herringbone. I created this little pattern today and figured why not share it with everybody. So what you'll need for this is yarn, and this is my favorite yarn, and this is my favorite print, the cinnamon cedar. I love this color. It's very fall, and it's just really pretty when it works up because it's a little rainbowy. Need a 5.5 millimeter hook, and I do recommend a full metal hook, not a clover hook, because we are going to need the hook for all of our puff stitches. You need an ornament with the clasp that comes off. I will post a link in the description so you can get these on Amazon. They're pretty cheap. You can get like, I think 8 of them in a pack. And then you need a darning needle and a pair of scissors. So let's get started. Let me pull out some yarn here since I'm starting a new. Oh, excuse me. What's going on here? There we go. You know how it is when you first start a skein of yarn and it's barf. Can't stand it. All right, so we're gonna do a slip knot. If you don't know how to do a slip knot, I'm gonna show you how to do a slip knot, but this pattern is not for first time crocheters. You need to be able to handle your hook and do puff stitches, but I will walk you through everything. So you take your yarn, wrap it around your 2 fingers, and then pull through the top. Hold on to both the yarn and your end, and there's your slip knot. And we're going to put it on our hook, tighten it down. That's what it should look like. So this pattern, it doesn't have to be used for an ornament. You can make panels with this. If you use a long crochet hook, you can do that, but it's tricky. I found that the smaller pattern or panel works out faster and it's much easier. And then you can just sew them together. It's not really for a blanket per se, but you could make different smaller items other than ornaments with this. So it is in multiples of 3, and we're going to need 2 panels, which consist of 4 of these V's and 8 rows. So with a multiple of 3, we're going to have 12 chains because we need 1 chain for the puff, and then we need to skip 2. 1 chain for the puff, skip 2, 1 chain for the puff, skip 2, 1 chain for the puff, and then your chain 2 for the first turning chain. So let's walk through that. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you should have 12 fairly loose chains because we're going to work in the back humps. I know everybody loves working in the back humps. I don't particularly care for it, but this pattern, it works out a lot better because we're going to use this V-stitch here to cinch at the end. So here's your first hump, and there's your second. We're going to work into this third hump. So we're going to yarn over, insert our hook, and draw up a loop. And that's our first of 4 loops, or draws, I should say, for your puff stitch that we're actually not going to even complete. So let's go ahead and do this 3 more times. Yarn over, drop a loop, yarn over, drop a loop, and one last time, yarn over, draw up a loop. So on your hook, you should have your first turning chain plus 8 more loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now normally in a puff stitch you would yarn over and pull through, but we're going to keep this puff stitch on our hook because we want to split it, and we can't split it and without going out back to the end. We need a whole row. So we're going to work 4 incomplete puff stitches all the way to the end. So we're going to skip this stitch and this stitch, so 2 stitches, and then we're going to work another incomplete puff stitch into this 3rd hump. So yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop. So now you should have 2 puff stitches on your hook. That's why you need the bigger hook, because then you can move these down as you work. We're going to skip the next 2 chains, and into that 3rd we're going to do another incomplete puff. So yarn over, drop a loop, yarn over, drop a loop, yarn over, drop a loop, yarn over, drop a loop. Now you should have 3 chains left. 1, 2, 3. And the very last chain, we're going to do our very last incomplete puff stitch. And this one can be the trickiest one. Sometimes it doesn't want to cooperate. So I cheat. I'll pull it up so I can get in there. Whatever works, right? Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, and one last time. Ta-da! All right, so now we should have this blob on our hook. What are we going to do with this? We're going to split each puff stitch and create the little V's. So how do we do that? We yarn over and we pull through half of the puff stitch. So you should have 4 loops here. You should have the loop on your hook and then 4 loops next to it. So we need to close this puff stitch that we just created off. So we're going to chain 1. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through the rest of the puff stitch and chain 1. So now we have a split puff stitch, which doesn't look like much right now, but once we get a couple more rows, you'll see how it comes together. So let's do it again. Yarn over, pull through half of the puff stitch. Sometimes you get caught on the other stitches. Chain 1, yarn over, pull through, chain 1. So it should start looking like this. And we're going to yarn over, pull through half of that puff stitch, yarn over, chain 1, yarn over, pull through the rest of the puff stitch, chain 1, yarn over, pull through half of this puff stitch, and in this puff stitch you should have 5 loops left after your 4 that you pull through, because you had that turning chain. So go ahead and close that puff stitch, yarn over, close this puff stitch, chain 1. There you go. So now we're going to work back across, doing the same exact thing, creating incomplete puff stitches in between each puff stitch that we split. So we're not going to turn our work, we're not going to chain, we're just going to yarn over and create a puff stitch within this split puff stitch. Then we're going to skip this hole and go in between these puff stitches here, yarn over, I'm going to skip this hole, go in between the puff stitch, skip this hole and go in between the last puff stitch. So now we should have this on our hook here. This is what it should look like. So we're going to split each one of these puff stitches now. So we're going to yarn over, pull through half, chain one, yarn over, pull through, chain one, yarn over, hello, I'm losing my puff stitches. Sometimes this happens and you have to be very careful not to drop your stitches. But we recovered. Chain one, yarn over, pull through. Let's cooperate, please. Talk to my yarn sometimes because sometimes it does not want to cooperate. It wants to split on you. But this yarn, for the most part, it's fairly easy to work with. Has its moments. It's usually because I'm on camera. This is why you just take your time, make sure you get all the stitches you need. And then you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks like I have a little string here. Let me get rid of that. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue this pattern of making incomplete puff stitches in between each one of these split puff stitches, and we're going to do that for 8 rows. So I'm going to continue on camera, but I'm going to speed it up so that you can see how it's progressing. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rows. For a little panel, it's enough to get from the bottom to the top and make a little space. So now what we're going to do is we're going to single crochet along the top. So we're going to chain 1, and then this first loop here where we close our puff stitch, we're going to make 1 single crochet. Then we're going to single crochet in between the puff stitches. Then we're going to single crochet on top before we close the puff stitch. So that's 3 single crochets. And we're going to single crochet into the space. But we're not going to use this top bump here. We just wanted it for the very first stitch. So we're going to jump right in between the puff stitches, and then on top of that first part of the puff we'll make a single crochet, and then back into this space, and then in between the puff stitches, and then on top of the puff stitch and into the space, and then in between, and then on top. So you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 single crochets on the top, and you should have your chain on the bottom. That's 12 also. So what we're going to do now is we're going to chain 1. We're going to fasten off, pull that tight, and it's kind of wonky, but once you sew it all together, it'll look really nice. So we're going to make a second panel, following all of the same steps until you get to the end. You're not going to fasten off, you're going to leave your yarn attached. So I will meet you back here when you have gotten to this top part. We'll single crochet together, and then I'll show you how we attach the panels together. So I'll see you in just a minute. All right, so now I have 2 panels. So we finished our second panel. Just see how pretty that is? So we're going to do our single crochets on the top. So we're going to chain 1. Then into the top of this puff stitch, we're going to put a single crochet, and then into the middle a single crochet, and on the top a single crochet, then in the gap a single crochet, and in between a single crochet, on top a single crochet, in the gap a single crochet, in between a single crochet, on top a single crochet, in the gap a single crochet, in between a single crochet, and on top a single crochet. So you should have 12 single crochets at the top, just like you did on your first panel. So now we're going to crochet these panels together, and you want to crochet them the exact same way you made them. You don't want to flip this over, you don't want to flip it upside down, because then your herringbones will be on a different angle. So this is where we ended. So we're going to marry up the puff stitches on the ends. Get this guy out of the way. We're going to chain 1. And then there's this right in between the 2 puff stitches. There's this chain space. We're going to go ahead and crochet a single crochet into this. Now, when we're doing this, this is going to be the inside of the ornament, so you don't need to worry about your stitches showing. They'll show like this, so you can see the stitches here. So we're going to take this X and the top of this stitch and single crochet twice. So go in between twice. We're going to go through the top X, which sometimes it doesn't look like an X, but we're going to do 2 single crochets. Top of this puff, top of this puff, 2 single crochets, top of this puff, and on top of this puff, if I can get it, 2 single crochets. Top of that puff, top of that puff, 2 single crochets on top of this puff, and on top of this puff, 2 single crochets, top of this puff, and on top of that puff, 2 single crochets. We're at our last one. This one looks a little different. Just grab the 2 outer loops, get on there, 2 single crochets. So now go ahead and chain 1. You can look at the other side and you get that nice sewn look. So we're going to go ahead and fasten off. Pull it tight. Now we want to sew this side together. I promise it'll look just fine. So we're going to take our hook, and you see that there's this opening here and you have the same opening there. We're just going to stick our hook through, and then we're going to attach our yarn with a slip knot. So you just put it on your hook, pull through, find your working yarn, hold on to the end, and slip knot. Now you see you've got these little stitches and the big stitches. Then you have little stitches, then big stitches. We're going to put 2 single crochets into each big stitch across. We're not going to attempt to get into these little stitches. Good luck. It's just way easier, and it looks just like the other side if you go through, which these are a little trickier because you end up catching yarn. There we go. 1, 2. Skip the little stitches and go for the big. 1. As long as you just grab your own yarn here. Sorry if I'm getting out of frame here. So you have these last two big stitches here. I keep grabbing part of the puff stitch in there. And then you have these two little rings. You're going to go through each one and you're going to do 2 single crochets. All right, so now let's put a stitch marker in here. Use an old pill bottle for my stitch markers because we're going to use this end to cinch up this part, but we need to weave in some ends here. You can certainly go ahead and cut them off, but you know how that works when you don't have a good knot. It can come undone and then your ornament could come undone. So I'm just going to weave it in haphazardly. Doesn't have to be perfect, just enough to get it out of the way and make sure that it's not going to come undone on you. I just kind of weave it through some stitches and right, and then we've got all these ends. Lord love a duck. Let's see here. Let's do this one first. And this is an ornament, so it's not critical that you weave these in all a bazillion times, but enough to where it's not going to unravel on you. One, two more. Oh, I loathe ends. I always make things that have a lot of ends. Just lovely. But again, just get them hidden and I would say you could probably do this as you go, but I get caught up in the moment. Some people don't mind ends. I wish there was like this magical knot you could tie when you start anything, that would hold if you just cut your yarn right next to it. That'd be great for color changes and stuff. I'm sure there's methods out there that are pretty reliable, but I only know so much. All right, that's good. All right, so we have our ends woven in, and this is the out or the inside, so we need to turn this the other way. You can see the pretty stitching that's from the double or single crochets that we did. So now let's cinch this end up. Get our hook. We are going to chain one and cut enough to cinch. Doesn't have to be a mile long, but it does need to be long enough to cinch. Go ahead and thread your needle and get your ornament. We're going to do the bottom part first. Let's put our ornament in and line it up. And what I do is I go through these spaces here on either side of the V's. Make sure you get in the space. It's making all kinds of noise. Kind of pull it as you go along. Try to hold it up so it's not so noisy. Now this is where we single crocheted, so it's going to be a little tighter here, but we're going to go right in there and right in here. Find here. 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 And you want to pull it tight, but you don't want to rip your yarn. So be cautious at how tight you pull. I am well known for ripping yarn. So we want to make sure our ornament's lined up. And it's not going to close perfectly. So we're going to sew it closed. So just pull through in sections. But we want to make sure ornament is lined up. This is the trickiest part. It's getting that just right. And guys, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to make sure it is closed up. All right. So we're just going to leave that for now. Now we're going to cinch up the top. So go ahead and cut yourself a piece of yarn and thread your needle. And we're going to go through the big pull your yarn about right there. Skip 2, go through the big, skip 2. This is where we sewed together, so we're going to go through right here. Skip 2, go through the big. I don't pull this tight until the end. Make sure we're going through the whole stitch. This is where we sewed together, so we'll just go on the other side of that. This is where we cut off an end. It's poking out. And we have reached the end, so we're going to go into a stitch near the end. Go ahead and take your needle off your hook and pull the ends together. Go ahead and knot them. And you can trim the excess off of your yarn here. We're going to weave in. I know. More weaving in. Oh. But it's easy. We're just going to weave in. Sorry. Weave in through the top here. I can figure out which end is which. There we go. Need to pull it on my needle more. Right. Go ahead and trim those off. Now we just have the bottom. So I like to make a little knot. And then just weave it in. scissors here. All right. Now we can put the top back on. You can embellish it with different ribbons, leaves, or you can just leave it as is. But there's an ornament. Got your herringbone and spaces. Looks nice. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, I have a few other tutorials on my YouTube channel. And I also post all my little creations that I have made. I appreciate if you like, subscribe, and if you make an ornament, please show me. And you can find me on TikTok, Hooked by Heather, and that's it. So happy crocheting.